Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Dangerous. This movie tells the story of a reformed convict who travels to a remote island to investigate the mystery behind his brother's death. Unexpectedly, he comes into conflict with a band of heavily armed mercenaries. Actually, what is the secret hidden behind his brother's death? Let's find out in Dangerous. Dangerous begins by showing a young man named Dylan Forrester. Dylan is a former prisoner who was imprisoned for a murder he had committed in the past. Currently, Dylan is undergoing parole and the rehabilitation process is being guided by a psychiatrist named Dr. Alderwood. While Dylan was in prison, his mother rarely wrote to him because his relationship with his mother was not good. The only person who visits and contacts him the most in prison is his younger brother named Sean. Dylan seemed to really love Sean and depend on his little brother. One day Dylan received news of the death of Sean through a death certificate sent from a small island called Guardian Island. Shortly after, a man infiltrated Dylan's house and intended to rob his money. The man points a gun at him and threatens him to give up all his possessions. But instead of being afraid, Dylan feels pressured because he doesn't want to kill anyone again and doesn't want his past habits to repeat themselves. But because the man still doesn't listen to his warnings, Dylan is forced to fight the man to defend himself. From this it can be seen that in his past, Dylan often committed murder from time to time and is currently trying to quit his old life. The next day, a group of SWAT police officers led by the chief female police officer named Shaughnessy came to Dylan's apartment to conduct an investigation. After conducting a search, Shaughnessy and her partner found the man who had previously come to commit the theft yesterday was bound and unconscious. Shaughnessy, who finds Dylan's medicine from Dr. Alderwood, decides to see the doctor. Shaughnessy came to Dr. Alderwood's house the next day and asked about Dylan's current psychological state. Dr. Alderwood reassures Shaughnessy that Dylan is now starting to change and is unlikely to have the psychopathic behavior or actions he used to have. However, Shaughnessy still has doubts about Dr. Alderwood's words because she has seen the heinous murder cases committed by Dylan in the past and feels that a psychopath like Dylan will never change. A few days later, Shaughnessy received information from police colleagues that Dylan would appear at the funeral of his younger brother, Sean, on Guardian Island next week. Dylan sails to Guardian Island a few days later, where Sean's funeral is held. Guardian Island is an island that Sean once purchased to build a house and lodging business with his wife, Susan. Sean also often runs other businesses from the island from time to time. When Dylan arrived at Sean's inn, a female receptionist named Jo could immediately recognize Dylan as Sean's family. Jo then gave a room key to him. That night, Dylan looked nervous as he practiced expressing his condolences to his mother later because his relationship with his mother was still not good. When the funeral service arrived, Dylan's mother, Linda, was still indifferent to Dylan because she thought that Dylan had caused all this misfortune. Dylan then places flowers on the corpse of his younger brother. He realized that there was something odd about Sean's corpse because there were bloodstains on Sean's nails and stitches on the back of Sean's neck. Dylan begins to suspect that his brother's death was not caused by accident but by murder. Susan, who saw Dylan's arrival at the place, tried to approach him and explain the cause of Sean's death. Susan said that when she found Sean's body beside the lighthouse tower, Sean had already been found dead, presumably from falling from the lighthouse. Susan knew that there was still tension between Linda and Dylan, so she advised Linda to learn to trust Dylan and try to be more lenient with Dylan. However, Linda still insists that Dylan has caused many disappointments in her life to the point where she can no longer consider Dylan as her child. On the other hand, Dylan talked to a man who claimed to be Sean's co-worker named Messi. Messi expressed his condolences for the loss suffered by Dylan. Meanwhile, a police officer named Mikey looks at Dylan cynically and suspiciously. Mikey, who seemed curious, secretly contacted his superiors and asked about the traces of his criminal record owned by Dylan. Dylan then returned to his room and contacted Dr. Alderwood to report his current condition. Dr. Alderwood reminds Dylan always to take the medication he has prescribed for him and try to go through every rehabilitation process well. After that, Dylan, who was out of his room, met Sean's son named Freddie. Freddie then showed him a miniature submarine that his father had given him before he died. Officer Mikey, who has received Dylan's criminal record file, decides to arrest him without knowing that Dylan is currently on parole. Dylan, who feels that he has not committed any crime related to Sean's death, looks calm and does not take any resistance to Officer Mikey. While waiting for the arrival of his other police colleagues, Mikey decided to lock Dylan in the dungeon in the basement of Sean's house. Officer Mikey found it strange that Dylan, who was previously a dangerous killer, did not show any signs of violence or aggression at all. Dylan, who has to regularly take his medicine on time, asks Officer Mikey to take medicine from his pocket and give him the medicine. Dylan then explained to Officer Mikey that he was currently undergoing rehab and trying to live a more normal life. Shortly after, Officer Mikey went to the dock to check on the speedboat that had just arrived on the island. At first he thought that the person who was driving the speedboat was Officer Shaughnessy, but it turned out that the people who boarded the ship were a group of armed men. Officer Mikey, who was alone, decided to hide while watching their movements. But unfortunately, his position was known to them, and the group of gunmen immediately shot at Officer Mikey until he died. The group of gunmen is members of the mafia led by a businessman named Cole. Their purpose in coming to that place is to find Sean's treasure hidden on the island. They got the information from a young man named Hugh, Sean's business partner, who was at the scene when Sean died. Cole ordered one of his sniper members to monitor the situation from the lighthouse and another member named Winter to enter the basement of Sean's house. Meanwhile, Cole and the other members broke into Sean's house through the front door and immediately took everyone in the house hostage, including Hugh. Winter finds Joe locked up in the previously used prison to lock up Dylan. Winter didn't realize that it was all just a ploy planned by Dylan to distract him so that Dylan could hit him from behind until he passed out. At the same time, Cole sent another mafia member named Felix to go to the basement room to check the situation and sent another member named John to bring Freddy from the second floor. Hugh, who saw Cole and the other members were off guard, took advantage of the opportunity to escape, but when he arrived at the house's fence, he was immediately shot dead by the sniper in the lighthouse. Felix, who had received information from Winter about Dylan and Joe, immediately reported to Cole that two people had fled from the basement. Hearing this, Cole immediately went after Felix to ensure the situation. At the same time, Dylan and Joe try to enter through the house's back door to save their family. Seeing his family being closely guarded by John, Dylan tried to distract him by making noise from the kitchen. He quickly beat him when John entered the kitchen until he passed out. On the other hand, Cole, who realized that the person who managed to escape was Dylan, was disappointed in Winter for not doing his job well and killed him instantly. This is because Cole has learned that Dylan is a former ruthless killer who used to work for him. He orders all his men to capture and kill Dylan in exchange for large sums of money. Unfortunately, when Cole was about to go back into Sean's house, all access doors and windows had been closed by Dylan. John, who is still trapped in the house, has now been arrested and tied to an iron pipe in the basement. Dylan then interrogates John to find out the purpose of Cole and his men coming to Sean's house. However, Dylan could not force John to provide information because he no longer wanted to use violence. After that, Dylan, who returned to the living room where his whole family gathered, was suddenly kicked out by Linda because she thought Dylan had caused all this mess. However, Dylan still wants to protect his family, so he leaves the house alone to find out where Cole and his men are. Before he left, Susan told him about a trail behind the house that could lead him directly to the lighthouse on the coast. On the other hand, some of Cole's men are taking detector equipment from the ship that they will use to detect the treasure they are looking for. Dylan, who had arrived at the dock, tried to sneak in to find out what Cole and his men were planning. Unfortunately, Dylan's whereabouts were already known by the sniper in the lighthouse because of the writing that Messi had placed on the balcony of Sean's house. Dylan decided to run away using the speedboat beside him when the sniper started aiming his shot at him. Unbeknownst to Cole and his men, Dylan tried to detour the lighthouse using the secret passage Susan had previously told him. When he arrived at the lighthouse, Dylan immediately went up to the lighthouse tower to get rid of the snipers guarding there. After that, he immediately returned to Sean's house to save the rest of his family. At the same time, Felix, who managed to get into Sean's house through the ventilation hole, immediately released John, who was still tied into the iron pipe. Felix and John then went to the living room where Sean's family was. But when John entered the living room, Freddy suddenly shot John with a toy gun. This makes John feel annoyed that he immediately catches Freddy and intends to hurt him. Luckily, Dylan arrived just in time and saved Freddy right away. Dylan started attacking John with a few small punches because he was still afraid his psychopathic tendencies would resurface. But because he still couldn't overthrow John, Dylan had no other choice but to use violence to get rid of him. After successfully defeating John, Dylan tries to convince Linda to give him a chance to improve the current situation. In the middle of the conversation, Cole from outside called out to Dylan to get out of the house and work with him. Dylan, who wants to know what Cole's goal is to come to Sean's house, decides to leave the house and meet him. It turns out that Cole only intends to get Dylan out of the house so he can order his sniper to shoot him. After repeatedly failing to contact his hired sniper, Cole finally realizes that Dylan has defeated his sniper. Shortly after, Dylan returns to the house and explains that at this time, Cole and his men are looking for the treasure hidden by Sean on this island to pay off all his debts. Dylan then goes to Sean's workplace to find out where the treasure is. When he tries to search the liquor storage room next to Sean's study, he finds a secret door behind the storage cupboard. Dylan and Messi then entered the secret room. After some time, they arrived at the dungeon position just below the lighthouse tower. Coincidentally, Cole's men detect that the treasure they have been looking for is located in the lighthouse area where Dylan and Messi are currently. Unexpectedly, in the underground room, Dylan and Messi found an ancient submarine containing many gold nuggets. Messi then said that in the past, Sean had told about the submarines left by the Japanese state after their defeat in the Second World War. Messi did not think that what Sean said was actually true. Cole's men who had arrived there suddenly fired shots at Messi and Dylan. Fortunately, Messi and Dylan managed to dodge the shot. Dylan had no other choice but to let go of his aggressiveness and violent tendencies to kill Cole and his men. With years of experience as a hitman, Dylan brutally shoots at Cole's men with a machine gun. Cole, who had just arrived at the place, came dragging Linda and threatened Dylan to hand over all of Sean's treasure to him. Dylan, who doesn't want his mother to get hurt, has no other choice but to follow Cole's wishes. After considering that Cole will kill him and his family in the end, Dylan decides to throw the gold bar into the sea and turn against Cole. A furious Cole automatically throws Linda so that she hangs on the stairs. Dylan brutally attacked Cole immediately until he died right away. Dylan then saves Linda and makes her realize that he has changed into a better person than before this time. The film closes with a scene where Dylan decides to go on a journey to find his life's purpose. The moral that can learn from this film is about how Dylan keeps trying to protect his mother even though his mother has given up on him. We also can learn from Dylan's struggles against parts of his past self to become a better person. When we want to change into a better person, we must be able to believe that our mistakes in the past will never define who we are.